One of the quotes I love, Francis Schaeffer, he said, the greatest apologetic for evangelism is the oneness of Christians. So kind of having that posture saying, all right, our mission is going to be more effective because of that.
Welcome to Jesus in the Upper Left, where we're talking about gospel multiplication in the Pacific Northwest. Hey, thanks for being with us for this episode of the Jesus in the Upper Left podcast. My name is Gabe Kolstad, and I'm joined today by Pete Armstrong, who's part of our Multiply PDX team here in the Portland, Oregon area. And we are so excited to have Chad Clarkson with us from the Houston Church Planting Network. Can't wait to hear some insights, learn some things about why things have gone so well there in Houston with church planting, collaborative work, and what God is doing there.
Thanks. Great to be with you guys today.
Absolutely. Hey, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing there in Houston, kind of how things got started.
Again, appreciate you guys having me on. I grew up in the Midwest, from Iowa, actually. Came to know Jesus early and actually started engaging in ministry pretty early in high school and college, and had probably an early heart for both kind of seeing the church come together, just even as a 20-something, and then also got the church planting bug. My uncle was a church planter, so spent some time with him, and just kind of those two streams have been kind of running throughout my life. So been involved in planting a church in South Carolina, where I met my wife, Mindy. She started coming to the church. Went back to Iowa, started a church there, but she lasted about one winter in Iowa. So she was a Texan. So long story short, we ended up down here. So we have 6 kids now. So we got a crew ranging from like 22 to 8. So stay busy with that as well. But yeah, in terms of HCPN, actually moved to Houston to plan a church. So we had started something in our home and end up meeting Bruce Wesley, who's a pastor of Clear Creek Community Church, at a Leadership Network event. He was in this area, and we just started hanging out and having more conversations and hearing his heart for church planting. Long story short, ended up coming on board at Clear Creek as the pastor of church planting and missions. So, man, that was probably back in 2005, something like that. Maybe dating a little bit, but yeah, somewhere in there. So that kind of had the beginnings of what eventually became HCPN. So kind of how it emerged was I ended up coming on board as the church planting missions pastor of Clear Creek, and it was really kind of like it was a whiteboard for that role. Like there wasn't we hadn't had a previous mission pastor or church planting pastor, so really got to kind of create the vision from scratch. But we knew we wanted to be about church planting, so really just kind of developed it off of Acts 1:8 and feel like, all right, Jesus' words are a pretty good place to start. So when the Spirit comes on you, you're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and ends of the earth. So we kind of built our mission and church planting strategy off that. So our Jerusalem, our church is close to NASA and kind of the southeast part of Houston, Clear Lake area it's called. So we've got an area we call the 4B area that marks our boundaries, the B's being kind of geographic boundaries from the Beltway to the beach, Brazoria County to the Bay. So that geography we call our Jerusalem, and we do church planting there. We do multi-site, partner with other ministries and churches in that area. And then our global ends of the earth is really, we say we want to do missions that results in church planting. So that's kind of our global strategy. But our Judea Samaria really became, all right, how do we get after Houston? We're kind of in the suburbs of Houston, but Houston at that time, 6 million people, one of the most diverse cities in the United States, growing rapidly. So how do you make an impact with that? And we knew we wanted to be about church planting kind of in that sphere. So that's kind of how really HCPN kind of emerged. And we did a first gathering, I think it was in about December of 2009. And it wasn't like, all right, here's the strategic plan of the Houston Church Planting Network. It wasn't anything like that. It was just kind of bringing some friends together, people we'd built relationships with, and said, we want to be about Houston. Again, kind of talked and, shared those demographics. We want to be about church planting, kind of talked about as a way to, our strategy as far as being an evangelistic kind of presence in the city. We wanted to see new churches planted. And then we want to be a network. And really, we kind of said we want to be a network of networks. So we realized I think Keller, we referenced him earlier, Tim Keller, wrote an article called Movement Dynamics about the same time we were starting in 2009. And in that article, he talks about if you're really going to reach a city, you got to have multiple groups that are multiplying churches. So it's kind of with that heartbeat. So we said we want to be a network of networks. We weren't asking people to leave their tribe, whether it be Acts 29 or Baptist or CRC, whoever it may be, but keep your tribe, but wear a different hat that would be kind of cross-collaborative, cross-denominational for the city. So that was kind of our heart from the beginning.
Chad, we would love to hear about kind of where you're dreaming about going for the future, and some of your dreams, aspirations, how the Holy Spirit's leading you in this next season of life as an organization.
Over the years, it's just been a little at a time, seeing God grow it. Now we're dreaming about what we'd like to see kind of become. Right now we've got about 140, 150 churches engaged in HCPN. We're dreaming what would that look like to get to 400 churches in the next 5 years. That feel like that gets us about 10% of the churches in the city that could be working together on mission. So it's kind of a little bit about what we're dreaming about right now anyway.
That's amazing. Chad, I'm sad to say that there are more churches in Houston than in Portland.
Yeah.
Right now, but we don't.
Yeah.
We'll see how God leads.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's really encouraging to hear.
That's changing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. How many people are in Portland? How many you got?
Well, it's about 500,000 in the city proper, but a couple million in the area. There's 3 counties kind of right around Portland. Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to mention, we had the opportunity to take a small group from Multiply PDX to Houston not that long ago, just last fall, to the Houston Church Planting Network. It was a City Networks Learning Lab, and it was so powerful. And it's really sparked kind of a fascination with and a leaning into what's happening there in Houston, because there's so many principles I think that we can pull that are universal. Yeah, Houston's context is completely different than Portland's context, but when you really back up and look at it, God works in some really similar ways in different places, and so I think we have a lot to learn from you guys.
Well, and vice versa. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm excited for what's going on with Multiply PDX and y'all are doing there, so we can kind of learn from you as well. So appreciate what you're doing.
Share a little bit more of your heart. Like, why do you think working together to reach a whole city is so crucial?
Yeah, man, there's probably a lot of different reasons. I mean, even when I think of a city of the size of Houston, it's like, all right, one church, one denomination, one network can't get that job done by themselves, right? Nor, I think, should we have the posture or attitude that says, all right, we can get it done by ourselves. I think that probably lets pride seep in a little bit if that's probably our mentality. So I think it's kind of a posture of saying, hey, we need each other if this is gonna be reality. And I think for us and a lot of people that probably work with HCPN, it's really become convictional for us. Even thinking about Jesus' last words, right, in John 17, his prayer in the garden multiple times there as he looks kind of in the future and he's praying. He's really praying for the oneness of those that are going to follow him. And so there's I think a theological conviction in that for us, where Jesus is even saying, hey, I'm praying that they're going to be perfectly one so that the world may know both that I love them and that I was sent. So there's something that happens with our unity. Now, I'm not taken away from the cross by any means, but there's something that happens when that makes our mission more effective when we are unified. And people seem to respond to the gospel that way. One of the quotes I love, Francis Schaeffer, he said, the greatest apologetic for evangelism is the oneness of Christians. So kind of having that posture saying, all right, our mission is going to be more effective because of that. So there's probably some convictional kind of in that, why we want to work together. And then I think also there's the practical element. We encourage churches really to make collaboration just a priority, but then also a strategy. Make it a priority, because I think there's people already in your churches that it can often be harder for pastors than people in your churches. I think there's kind of all right, this person knows Jesus, I know Jesus, why aren't our pastors or churches talking? And sometimes they get that before often church leaders do. So I think it's having that posture, right, let's make it a priority. And then just encouraging churches to make it a strategy. Like what does a collaboration strategy look like for your church? I think most churches don't even think about that. You probably got, if you're any type of church, you probably got a discipleship strategy, right? You've got a worship philosophy, worship strategy, mission strategy, evangelistic strategy, things like that. But in terms of collaboration, most churches don't think about that. So we just try and encourage churches to, hey, what does it look like to begin to think like this?
Can I probe on that just for a sec?
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think are some of the reasons why it's so difficult for churches to, or maybe churches is the wrong word, because it really comes down to leaders.
Yeah.
What are the obstacles? Because I'm thinking about you. You got started, you weren't paid full time to do collaborative work when you got started in that, right? That was sort of a little side thing. How did you find the time? I mean, that seems like a big piece to it is how did you find the time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It does take time. I mean, it's a lot of cups of coffee, a lot of lunches. You're right. As far as you say, organizations and networks really don't collaborate together, but people do collaborate together. So it's a lot of that, building relationships. And luckily, I was at a church, even though I was a church planting missions pastor hired here. I mean, they saw that as vital and important. So I worked that into kind of my daily or weekly rhythms as far as, all right, I'm going to make it a priority. Again, and a strategy to meet with other pastors, meet with other church planners, get to know them. And again, not cast a vision like, all right, come in leading with vision, but really listening, right? What do you see God doing? How can I pray for you? And then you kind of begin to kind of see where hearts and feel unified, feel connected. And this makes sense like, all right, this feels like something could stir here in terms of a collaborative relationship. But yeah, it takes time and it continues to take time.
Do you think, just so we understand your context a little better, but do you think that Houston tends toward collaboration or tends towards silos, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's probably both and. I mean, it took a while. Like, it's not like, all right, it's not like we started HCPN and then, wow, fantastic, everybody
jumped on board.
This is better than sliced bread. Let's jump in. So it took a while. I mean, there's some churches like it was like I've been having talks with 4 or 5 plus years before they kind of said, hey, we want to work with HCPN. So I think it's definitely the posture has changed, and I think probably I know that just from conversations with other pastors who've been in the city a while, who have seen that, like when they planted a church maybe 25 years ago. I mean, there wasn't anything like this, right? It was like they knew maybe one other church planter, had their head down, was working that way, but nothing like that. And then I hear from pastors that move into the city from other cities and start to kind of hang around HCPN, get to know, kind of, feel the culture a little bit. There's like, man, there was nothing like this in my city. So I do feel like those silos are have broken down to some extent. Now, obviously, there's some churches that are going to say, hey, we're going to do our own thing. But seeing more and more kind of come to the table and say, all right, let's do something together. And I think it's just kind of the posture of like, all right, as you lead a church, you got your eyes down, focused on that church, and like, all right, we're going to get after it. But then you look at you get your eyes up and see the city, and there's a million more people here, since you started the church, and it's just, realize, man, we have to work with other people.
What does it mean for a church to, work with you guys essentially? Like when you are like, okay, great, it seems like this church is on board, like. They're showing up for stuff. They're making financial donations. They're taking on an intern. I mean, what does involvement look like?
Yeah, it's all different levels. I mean, it even comes in seasons for churches. Maybe as they have a church planner and their church is going to look different, and kind of things ebb and flow a little bit. But we've kind of said for over the years, it's like, all right, if you want to be kind of a part, or a partner with HCPN, it's we talk about four C's: committing to Christ. All right, this is about Jesus. We're going to meet at the gospel. That's kind of our gathering spot. We're committed to collaboration again. All right, this is kind of cross-denominational, multi-ethnic, different parts of the city, so we want to do collaboration. Third, we're committed to church planting. So somehow you got to be engaged in church planting, whether you're helping fund church planners, raising up church planners, assessment. But how can your church point to being about multiplication? And then really about this, we just say we're about the city, saying, again, we're about gospel saturation. So how do we reach the city together? So those kind of are our 4 C's. Now with that, again, there's different kind of engagement. We've kind of listed churches as anchor churches, partner churches, network churches, and engagement looks different at different times. And because of capacity, a mega church is going to be different than a brand new church of 50 people that just started. So there's we want everybody to play though, right? Same sandbox. Everybody jump in. Everybody has a role. Let's work together.
Nice. Love that.
Hey, Chad, can you paint the picture for those that are maybe listening, watching, going, okay, I'm in Portland or I'm in the Northwest. I have no idea how to connect. What does a starter collaboration strategy look like? So for you guys, maybe that bottom level, what is that? How could you define that a little bit?
Yeah, what I tell groups is like cities that are getting started, it's like, all right, the 2 keys of collaboration are like the 2 wings of an airplane, right? It's mission and relationships. So even in a lot of the conversations I had in the early days, I feel like I still come back to now as I'm kind of having conversations with new partners. So, the mission element as far as collaboration, it's about, all right, for Houston now, that's 7 million people. For Portland, that's 3 million people. That's kind of our mission. It's like, all right, we're about the gospel proclamation and gospel demonstration, and really in every nook and cranny of the city. So, and that's, when you kind of cast that vision, it's not just about church planting. Church planting is a strategy, but a strategy to really see the city reach for the gospel. So it's kind of waving that flag. And then the other flag is just, again, go back to what we talked about earlier, relationships and building those relationships of trust, I think is so key, and it takes time. And so a lot of time people want to rush to collaboration. And it's like, kind of slow your roll a little bit, take your time, build those relationships, because that's such a key too, to kind of focus on, you want to build the right coalition of the right leaders. And so that's important, and that's going to happen through kind of taking time to, share a meal together, drink coffee, things like that.
So what do you think, what's like a recent story that has just got you so hopeful and excited, and those ministry moments that you're like, this is why I get out of bed every morning. This is why I have all these coffees and these lunches.
Yeah, so we just had at our last gathering. So one of the things we do with HCPN, we have monthly gatherings, usually about 9 times a year is when we meet. We had Josh White with us in March, who some of your listeners may know right there in the Portland area. So last month, though, we had a speaker, but we also did a commissioning we run kind of cohorts and residency programs, and had our next group of planters who finished that. 5 of them get up, kind of share, hey, here's where I'm planting in Houston. Thank you for the engagement. And it was just a great kind of celebration with their families. Had a chance for past residents to lay hands on them. Everybody else kind of raising their hands. It was a diverse group, as far as where they're planting, what they look like, different tribes. And it was just a sweet moment to kind of, pray over them and know, all right, here's 5 new churches that are going to be started in our city that have like kind of that collaboration and kingdom DNA. So that's recent anyway.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. It was fun because we had there was an Anglican guy, there was an Acts 29 one, Baptist, non-denominational. I'm trying to remember all the others, the different groups, but Hispanic, Asian, Anglo, African American as well. So it was just encouraging. It was like, all right, this is a glimpse of the kingdom, and people excited about one another and the work that's happening.
Yeah, you guys have done an incredible job with diversity matching your city, which I think is such a challenge no matter where you are. I can say for sure, even in Portland, which is nowhere near as diverse as Houston, it's a struggle to try to think like that and be inclusive in those ways. How have you really gone? I know that doesn't just happen by accident. What are some of the things you've done to include as many kinds of church models and forms and streams and different things that you have?
Yeah, we say, I think one of our principles is work towards diversity. It's not just going to happen. I think you got to work towards it. So it's a lot of our board is diverse. So I think that's a first step. I think when we have our gatherings, I think they're diverse. The presenter, people different, whether it's a speaker or someone sharing announcements. I try to lead from the back of the room, so try to get other people up front as much as possible, and people seeing, whether it be different church models or different church planning strategies, or they look different. It's just kind of thinking about that, so people can come and at least say, oh, I can connect with that person, or I relate to that person, just because of who they are or what they've done or what they're doing.
We've talked a little bit about resistance.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about whether you've had criticism related to, not only the diversity, but the collaboration and how that goes, or how much resource you put into it. What have been some of your speed bumps with that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we've probably had more criticism that's reached me. Occasionally I'll hear a few things, which I get. I understand when you're trying something new, you're always going to get that a little bit. You always get the, do we really need more new churches? You kind of hear that. The kind of, we tried to collaborate before, it didn't work. Things like that. And some. If you don't take a church planner, if you kind of say no, you're probably not wired as a church planner, so we've kind of received some kind of pushback over the years on that. But overall, I'd say, the people that are engaged with HCPN, they're engaged because they want to be. So I'm not really hearing from criticism from people that are already part of it. It's probably people that are outside of it. Mm-hmm. And for collaboration, I think one of the things we've discovered, it's like, all right, we're not focusing on every single church in Houston. It's like, all right, who can meet in the middle and collaborate? I think one of our learns over the years is, maybe on one side, if you get really maybe very theologically liberal churches, maybe they're not thinking about evangelism, let alone church planting. If that makes sense. So they're not really at the table and, kind of pushing back that way. And the same thing, if it's maybe very, on the other side, kind of a very fundamental church, they're not coming to the table either. Cause it's like, all right, we're going to do our thing. And so I think, we've learned, a passion for truth and unity very rarely exists in the same church. I'm not saying the truth, Jesus, but kind of what they think. So we're trying to focus on whatever percent of churches that's kind of who we're highlighting.
Yeah. So you're not sweating the fact that not everybody wants to play.
Nah, you're not going to get everybody. Some people, they're going to do their own thing. And we'll work with who wants to work together.
Yeah. So this is your, your vocation, your calling. But with our team, we're all pretty much volunteers. We do this in our, quote unquote spare time. And, what? Yeah. So what do you see? Like, encourage us because, we're going to stay a volunteer. But then what's some of the highlights of how you do it as well?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Yeah, for the first several years that we did at HCPN, it was like, so I was kind of in a volunteer role. It was part of my role as the church planting missions pastor, but I was also overseeing, local missions, global missions. So it's not like there was all this ton of time to invest. So, and I felt like the growth was kind of, more flatline, kind of more bumps. It took a little while to kind of get going. And I think, over time, when I moved to more of a full-time role with HCPN, it was we just kind of knew it was the right time. More churches were engaging, some significant churches were engaging, resources were becoming available, and it was taking more time. And so I think we've seen the impact of just being able to kind of invest more time in HCPN, and we have now 3 full-time people that give kind of energy to HCPN. So over time, that's obviously helped, just because you get more time to think about it. If I'm in the shower in the morning, I'm not thinking about my church, in that realm as far as what are my daily tasks. You get to think about, what's the next steps with HCPN versus like, all right, you guys are leading churches. So obviously that's your priority in trying to build this collaborative venture at the same time. So, I've kind of told pastors early, what does it look like to kind of tithe your time to the city? Could that be a starting point? Maybe as you're encouraging pastors to kind of engage. So that may be a starting point or something for people to think about. But I'm excited for what's beginning to happen. But I think over time, it's probably going to take someone who's giving more, time and energy to it to kind of help begin to take it to another level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Because I can see, even Pete, me, Oshua, who this audience is familiar with, and others on the Multiply PDX team. Like there's moments when all of us are given every last minute that we can to this effort.
Yeah.
And, you could see that we wish there was a little bit more time we could wring out to invest. But because we're not at that point, what would you suggest would be for those that want to be collaboratively involved? And I'm sure we're overusing that word in this session. Yeah. But what activities that those people could engage in, do you think would make the most difference? Let's say you're tithing your time. So you got 4 or 5 hours a week, you're going to invest in more outside the walls of the ministry, or if somebody's, leading in a micro church or a house church network outside of that particular venture, what activities do you think would yield the most result?
Yeah, no, great question. I think for us, especially in the early days, it was gathering together. And that's why we've continued to gather, do these. So we've now done like 106 gatherings over the course of the last 12, 13 years. I know we celebrated 100th last August, so whatever we're at now. So you can see that's a value for us because there's something about having people in the same room that things just begin to stir. just relationships, people in different parts of the city, kind of get to know each other. And, although we bring in, I feel like great speakers get to hear, I don't really think that's the draw. I think the draw is more, relationally get to see people you don't get to see often, be reminded of our common mission and vision together. So I think if I was telling someone, how would you invest your time? That's probably something I would say, do that. Another thing would be, all right, how are you personally investing in a church planner? For us in Houston, we do collaborative training. So we have a lot of pastors that speak into different elements of what we do with our residencies and cohorts. And so trying to find an on-ramp for maybe a passion, Gabe, you may have a certain passion, Pete, you may have a certain passion, and trying to plug them into, a certain training element. I think that's what our board would say, because they're all leading churches. Our entire board are pastors of large churches throughout Houston, so they're busy, but they're also kind of investing time in HCPN, significant time, but helping them kind of, all right, hey, here's where I want you to focus on, knowing that they don't have to develop an entire church planning program or something like that, but being able to let them play in their sweet spot a little bit. So that's probably two things: gather together and maybe find an on-ramp to begin to invest in a church planner.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about kind of the residencies that you guys do. Like, what has made those kind of click and work well for you guys?
So we do, and that was another element. I think we didn't start with that with HCPN. We started with our gatherings. And then over time, as we kind of were looking under the hood of some different networks, it just felt like, all right, this is something we can bring to the table as far as kind of helping with training. So we now do kind of three different programs. I alliterate everything. Sorry, it helps me remember. But foundational residency, finishing residency, and fortifying cohorts is what we call them right now. So foundation, we started with a finishing. And so that would be like for those that are probably a year out from launching a new church, bring them in for meet once or twice a week. We do anything from, significant soul care work with them to everything you need as far as, being a church planner, developing systems, working on your preaching, evangelism, developing your launch team, prayer strategies, all that good stuff, fundraising. So that's kind of the year of the finishing residency. We provide a stipend for those that are selected for the finishing residency. In that process, we began to realize, all right, we were getting a lot of people who weren't going to be ready to plant a church in a year. So we realized we kind of had to reverse engineer it a little bit. So that's where we launched kind of our foundational residency. And that's more like for those that are kicking the tires with church planning, but are probably, 18 to anywhere 5 years out maybe to plant. But how do we begin to get them in a pipeline to be thinking about church planning? So we meet once a month for our foundational. We just finished that group a couple weeks ago. It runs for 9 months. And then our most recent, I think we've done it 3 years now. We call them fortifying cohorts, and that's really a post-launch thing. I think statistics say even on businesses, I think the success of new businesses isn't so much what happens in kind of the planning stage, but really those first 2 years. And so it's a lot of kind of being flexible, being learning from your mistakes, things like that. So it's a chance to kind of walk with those that have just launched and kind of help them develop both kind of in the strategic leadership area, but then also soul care. So those are kind of our three programs. We also have 5 C's. Sorry, more alliteration. But you asked to kind of what's kind of maybe some secret sauce stuff. I think the cohort element, be the relationships with other. So it's not just one person going through training. It's not content. Content is not one of the C's we use. Because you can get content everywhere. There's a lot of content, but the cohort of relationships and having that worked out with one another, the collaborative nature of it, I think was one of our C's. City focused, everybody planting in our residency is going to plant in Greater Houston. So that's part of it. Coaching supported. Coach is a huge element. And I have one other C I'm missing, but I'll think
4 out of 5. Not bad.
Yeah, 4 out of 5. So 80%. We'll take it. Kind of same as our church plant success rate. So,
Yeah, you had about 80%. Is that what you see, about 80% success?
Oh, I don't know. No, it's probably, so I just ran the number of our finishing who went through the finishing residency with our board, and it was pretty good. I mean, the ones that we've had, 54, I'm doing my math here. Yeah, it was over 80%. I think 87% are still going.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's fantastic.
And different sizes, some that are, still pushing up against 100 and some that are over 1,000. So
one just follow-up question based on what you said, Chad, and then I'll turn it over to Gabe again. But do you guys do any kind of different training for those that are kind of in the core Houston versus in the greater Houston area?
Yeah, I mean, we talk contextualization. So we do, like, again, that probably comes out more in coaching or helping church planners think like missionaries. I guess that's kind of what you're asking with the question, that church planning is going to look different. Yeah. So like, we don't teach a specific model. Like, if people want to do a certain model, one of the things we talk about is like person, place, and plan. Again, sorry for the alliteration. I really apologize. But in terms of church planning, so who you are as a church planner, the person, it's got to fit both the place and the plan. So you're kind of looking at the Venn diagram, what meets in the center. And so we want to help planters, think strategically about that. Like, does the model you're thinking work with where you want to plant and who God has wired you as a planter? So trying to help, some of that. So we do have, different contextualization for where you're planting.
One of the things I'm curious about when you're talking about your residencies and you get the, what's the first one called? Foundational. And you're seeing more people that are, early in the process. Where are they coming from? Where do you see most of those people coming to you from in terms of, are they, indigenous leaders from Houston who are saying, hey, I've got this call in my life? Are they coming in from other cities? Where do you see most of that happening?
Yeah, I think now from all within. I think early we'd get some from other cities, and occasionally we'll still get some in from other cities. It takes so much longer. You know how it, I mean, it just takes, it's going to take them 4 or 5 years just to kind of build a network of relationships. So versus just kind of, all right, you already have your network of relationships. So that's just a huge advantage in church planning. So I think now the majority probably come through our partner churches. We'll still get an occasional, like, hey, don't let my church know I'm here type thing, because it needs to stay under the radar. Maybe they don't want to get fired or something. So we still occasionally get that. But the majority now, we're trying to use it, have it be a tool for like our partner churches, right? You have someone in your church that's thinking about church planning. All right, let's send them through the foundational residency. They can get some more training. It also is kind of like a year-long assessment to kind of watch them and like, all right, does this person have, wired as a church planner? Does it make sense, whether it be now or later? So that's kind of, I would say the majority are coming from now kind of churches within HCPN.
That's killer. Do you think that's because you are offering the foundational residency? Do you think that is because there's momentum around the city and awareness, or some combination of, or some other factor?
Yeah, probably combination of. We've got, even now that we've been doing enough, some churches are kind of, even that within HCPN are kind of have their own kind of things now, and some will still send, they may have an in-house residency, but still send their church planner to, one of the residencies to be a part of it, because it makes sense on the collaborative nature and what they can receive there at HCPN that they can't just at their local church. And then other churches just like, all right, we don't have time to develop a whole program, so we're going to send them, to be part of this, and then we'll kind of be involved as far as the mentor and coaching aspect, and then we'll kind of process together. So it's probably a both and.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One of the questions that I have is, difference, probably a pretty big difference between Houston and Portland is we have a significant decentralized gospel expression focus here. What I mean by that is there's a lot of, especially right now, disciple-making movement, house church activity, non-traditional, much smaller expressions, a lot of that happening. In fact, I've thought, and if you're listening and watching and this is you, I think most of the good news that I'm hearing from across our city with regard to the expansion of God's kingdom is happening in these places that were formerly kind of like unknown or weren't happening a lot. But now it's a big deal. Chad, how would you encourage our city, our leaders, knowing that that's going to be different, and what advice do you have for us as a city and those leaders who are pursuing that model?
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic, and we're seeing more of that in Houston. It's been going on 25, as long as I've been kind of involved in HCPN in different aspects. But I think there's an uptick even since COVID, where it's even more are engaging and more, kind of the relational based expressions of church planning. So we try to encourage that. We talk in terms of HCPN of being a network of networks. So one of the things we do quarterly is we'll bring the different network leaders together. And so we'll have those network leaders represented in that. They may be leading like a house church type movement. So we've got several recognized now in Houston. So trying to figure out, in fact, I got some meetings coming up to talk about this very thing. How can we be more effective, whether it be like location-based versus legacy, location-based versus relationally based. I know there's overlap in terminology and all that, but I think we know what we're talking about, kind of the two different streams. How do we work those together? Again, because I think it takes a both and if we're going to really get into every nook and cranny of the city and we talk gospel saturation, it's not going to, it's not going to work. That's how Starbucks, right? That's how Starbucks does. And there's not a large Starbucks downtown that everybody goes to. They're on, really every block, and I don't know what the coffee place is. Is it still Starbucks in Portland, or you probably got all sorts of stuff?
Dutch
no, that's
Bros.
illegal.
We're sending
yeah.
Dutch Bros down to you guys. So there you go.
I just heard that. I heard there's a Dutch Brothers going in.
I missed the IPO, but it's fine.
Okay. Yeah. But but that idea, it's like, all right, there's going to be different models. We're going to be friends. You may want to do that way. My ecclesiology, some of them say maybe a little different, but hey, I'm for you. If we're seeing people come into the kingdom and respond to the gospel, then we're going to be for you.
Have you had much experience with seeing those types of leaders, like that might be experimenting with or plugging into, more of a decentralized model? Have they connected much with residency in the same way?
So it's interesting. We have been talking about starting a residency like that. So like last year we had someone go through that was specifically targeting reaching Muslims from Afghanistan. He had served over there, and that was going to be his expression of the church. So it's going to look different. So it's very relationally based. One of the things we've talked about is for the residency, like looking for multipliers. That's kind of our heart. So if it was someone like, all right, they're not just thinking I want to do a house church and in my neighborhood, but they're thinking like a movement. Like, what does that look like? Then I would say, they're definitely a residency candidate, even though it would look different.
What encouragement would you give us? What coaching or counsel would you give us as we're trying to do the same thing you are, serve multipliers and prepare them. So what would you share with us?
It's so much like what we did like 12 years ago when we were starting. It's still stuff I feel like I'm doing now. Like even like, meeting with people and the two arms of collaboration. It's still about mission and relationships. And sometimes it's like you've had a church on now for a decade, but now they get a new pastor coming in. It's like, all right, now it starts over. It starts over with that leader. So I think just kind of that element. It's what I tell cities, leaders, building a coalition of the right leaders, which sounds like you guys are doing there. I think that's so key. And you know them when you find them, right? There's someone who think big C church, not just their C. They're thinking kingdom. It's leaders who are they're humble, they're generous, they're living open-handed. It's like I think it's just that posture. So you're looking for those type of leaders, from the get-go. Again, kind of the share the mic principle. It's like it's not just one voice; it's multiple voices. And I'd say just keep pushing the flywheel, to use kind of Jim Collins' language from Good to Great. It's like, all right, we've got a direction we're going. It's just going to take time, and let's see what the Spirit is going to do with all this work and effort that we're putting in.
Well, man, thank you so much for taking time to encourage us, invest in us. Thanks for setting such a great example and just being yourself so open-handed. I love the way HCPN shares information and learnings and just encouragement very open-handedly. So, Chad, we appreciate you so much.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
I don't want to miss the opportunity to connect people to what you're doing, Chad. So do you mind sharing how people can find you and how they can get a little more information if they want to learn more about HCPN? Yeah,
hcpn.org. You can find us there. My email is chad@hcpn.org. Feel free to hit us up. If you're interested in the City Networks thing, we're going to do another lab this September. I think it's 26th to 28th, and you can find that on citynetworks.org. So just feel free if we can, again, serve you in any way or whoever. Happy to share what we have.
I know we talked a little bit about failure in terms of like if a ministry leader experiences failure and how you handle that. But can you tell us about something that you've tried with HCPN that has been a total flop and how you handled that?
Total flop. Yeah, we haven't done like a ton of new stuff. Like when I say keep pushing the flywheel, we don't. And maybe I need to take more risks. Maybe we need to look at that more.
Yeah, we want some big mistakes you can talk
Yeah,
about.
I think when we first started, like several years ago, people may not even remember this. We tried to kind of going regional with HCPN,
Okay.
as far as different parts of the city, and we just weren't ready. Like it was within 6 weeks. I'm like, nope, didn't have enough leaders in key places around the city. Now we have brought that back now in the last year. So we are now developing a regional strategy, and it's a part of what we do. And so I think one of our, which was a flop earlier, hopefully will become a good success for us. Just because I think it's timing with that, having the right leaders in place, kind of for the season where we're at. And so I think that's something. Houston's big, so we have to do that. Almost 10,000 square miles, so we've got to come up with something regionally. I'm trying to think of other things that I probably wouldn't. I mean, there's probably been certain training things we've done that I felt like, I wouldn't do. Like early when we were doing the residency, too much content, like way too much content. Again, I mean, it was like, you don't have time to, we were doing every Tuesday and Thursday, full like 9 to 4 days. It's like, you don't have time to apply anything, right? It's like, all right, here's Tuesday, and then you're back again Thursday, and your head's still hurting from Tuesday.
Well, I do want to ask the barbecue question because I was in Houston like a year ago, and we went down to the museum district. I mean,
yeah, where'd you eat?
I mean, what's the most famous one there? Like with, I mean, they had live music out in a tent, like that, some like live blues and jazz and.
Yeah, I mean, Houston. The great thing about Houston's just got good food.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a lot of good styles. I mean, in terms of barbecue, I mean, I've got my favorites. There's Killen's. There's some on the north side of the city. I got one right here close called Red. I mean, there's just a lot of good barbecue places. So, and the majority of people do eat barbecue, except for my wife. So I try to eat it as much as I can for lunches. So, yeah.
My last question for you is, what stokes your fire? Like you're over a decade in this, you're dealing with lots and lots of people all the time. How do you keep your personal passion and vision hot for the reason why you said yes in the first place?
Yeah, I think probably goals. I'd say goals. Yeah, so I think, for us, like, all right, how do we feel like right now I feel like we're kind of stuck on 130, 140 churches, right? And almost like if you study like church growth, how a church has kind of, maybe 75. So I'm wondering that now for like city networks, like, is this like a place that we have to discover certain things that are going to help us move to kind of that 400? So that kind of excites me, thinking about that, how to think strategically about that. And, praying and dreaming towards 400. I think that's an element. Kind of different initiatives, way to collaborate. Although we're about, our organizing principle with HCPN is church planning, really beginning to kind of build stronger kind of a prayer network and prayer ministry with what happens with HCPN. Realize those are really kind of the roots that are going down deep. And I mean, if you read like, Garrison's book on church planting movements, number one characteristic is always kind of united prayer, right? Desperate united prayer. So just making that, and it's not like we just decided, let's start praying. It's not that, but making it like more of a priority, more focus, and we're doing more things to align with that. So that excites me. And just seeing other cities. So you mentioned you guys came, we had 13 cities come to that first learning lab we did. We're dreaming about like, how do we help 40 cities kind of the next few years? I mean, do something like what's happening with HCPN, and not so like, let's start HCPN everywhere. It's really, I want to learn. So Portland's doing it, so it's going to help us back in Houston or these different places. But it feels like something's in the water, in terms of collaboration. It's like the Spirit striking a match in different, not just around the United States, but really around the world. Continue to get calls for like, hey, I've heard about HCPN. This is what's stirring in our location. So I think that's where beginning to kind of, I think, gives me energy for, who knows however many years the Lord allows.
Thanks for everything you do.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Jesus in the Upper Left. We want to ask you a quick favor. Would you please subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and share with those that are in your life that might benefit from the content. Hit the notifications button, rate and review, of course. And then head on over to upperleftshow.com where you can find bonus content, opportunities to connect with those around the city that are doing similar work as you, resources to help you, and just a way to connect to the community. We hope to see you again next time.